But that being said, we do need to talk about it because there could be a lot of implications, not only for the precious metals markets, but for what's going on in geopolitical terms between the West and China and Russia. So I'll start off with you, Jim. You have some background in the military. From your perspective, what are your thoughts on what's happened over the last week, or actually probably over the last month, with the eventual lead up to the invasion of Ukraine by Russia?
Yeah, well, first, let me also, at the risk of, slanting things, prayers for the Russian soldiers as well. I mean, everybody, it's a bad situation that we have right now, and, soldiers on both sides and civilians are going to suffer, and that's
Right.
a shame. Just a little bit about my background. I took 6 years of Russian language, a lot of Soviet studies classes in college. I was actually almost got a dual degree. I visited the Soviet Union in '84 and '86. I went back in 2000, went back to St. Petersburg in 2001. So I've been to Moscow, Kiev, St. Petersburg, was Leningrad then, and saw the devastation that communism wreaked on people, and that's one of the reasons I joined the military, is to defend against that. And one of the big things I learned is, whether it's in Kiev or in Moscow, they're very good people there. Both sides. And I prayed for the collapse of the Soviet Union. That came. It should have been a big victory. But it seems like our leaders have basically wanted to extend the Cold War. There was a real opportunity to kind of embrace, the former Soviet republics, including Russia, and, really kind of bring them in. And it seems like we kind of held our hand up for the longest time. And so that kind of feeds into the situation now.
Hey guys, it's Rob Keynes from 𝙂𝙊𝙇𝘼. We're recording this on February 24, 2022, on the heels of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is going to be the subject of what we're talking about, among other things, today in the video. We did this roundtable because I wanted to bring that to the community. We could chat about what we think is going to happen. I'm joined by Ian Everard, who's the owner of Ark Silver, who joins our program every 2 weeks to talk about the silver and gold markets, as well as Jim Forsythe, who's part of the Citizens for Sound Money organization, as well as the owner of Silverback Precious Metals. How are you guys doing today?
Good considering. Considering the news.
First thing first, as a Christian, I will say prayers go out to people in Ukraine. It's never good when you're in the middle of a geopolitical battle and you've got troops and tanks and helicopters rolling into your cities, and we'll try to be as respectful as we can in talking about this towards Ukrainian people and maybe even people in the United States and Europe that have family and friends over there, as much as we can. But that being said, we do need to talk about it because there could be a lot of implications, not only for the precious metals markets, but for what's going on in geopolitical terms between the West and China and Russia. So I'll start off with you, Jim. You have some background in the military. From your perspective, what are your thoughts on what's happened over the last week, or actually probably over the last month, with the eventual lead up to the invasion of Ukraine by Russia?
Yeah, well, first, let me also, at the risk of, slanting things, prayers for the Russian soldiers as well. I mean, everybody, it's a bad situation that we have right now, and, soldiers on both sides and civilians are going to suffer, and that's a shame. Just a little bit about my background. I took 6 years of Russian language, a lot of Soviet studies classes in college. I was actually almost got a dual degree. I visited the Soviet Union in '84 and '86. I went back in 2000, went back to St. Petersburg in 2001. So I've been to Moscow, Kiev, St. Petersburg, was Leningrad then, and saw the devastation that communism wreaked on people, and that's one of the reasons I joined the military, is to defend against that. And one of the big things I learned is, whether it's in Kiev or in Moscow, they're very good people there. Both sides. And I prayed for the collapse of the Soviet Union. That came. It should have been a big victory. But it seems like our leaders have basically wanted to extend the Cold War. There was a real opportunity to kind of embrace, the former Soviet republics, including Russia, and really kind of bring them in. And it seems like we kind of held our hand up for the longest time, and so that kind of feeds into the situation. Now, the big picture here is this is complicated. Mm-hmm. If anybody paints this as a, these guys are the villains, these guys are the good guys, that's a naive way to look at it. The West has played a role. Obviously Russia's played a role. Ukraine has played a role in getting us to where we are. And I've been brushing up on the history of this, and I'm certainly no expert, but the big push to have basically in '91 the break up the Soviet Union. It's come out recently, but back then it was said we will not extend NATO past some certain line, and they've extended well past that line. Mm-hmm. Now all the way to Ukraine. They're talking about adding Ukraine to NATO, and Ukraine's bordering with Russia. The other complicating factor is Ukraine it's a culture and a country, but yet there are a lot of Russians in Ukraine because the way broke it up. That's created a lot of division in the country. But both Russians in Ukraine and remain a country rather than get split up. Then we had the coup in 2014. And that's an interesting one because, the president said he didn't want to be part of the EU. There started to get some riots because of that. So they had a meeting and he agreed to move the elections up to May, which is like a month or two away from the current time. That way, policies, they could vote him out. But despite that, the coup continued and he fled. And there's the U.S., I think, spent quite a bit of money being involved in that. And that's a dangerous tactic to play, when you're helping to fund a coup next to Russia. And so the region's kind of been a mess ever since then. And then somehow we had peace with 4 years with now Biden comes in and then we're starting to talk about, they're joining NATO. From what I understand, it's really, they're never going to join NATO. From what I understand, it's just not going to happen, yet we say that they are pushing them to get in the EU. So I feel like poor Ukraine has become kind of a pawn in this power struggle. And that goes to both sides, right? But, being a border country to Russia, you gotta be a little sensitive about people's security desires. So, like I said, I met a lot of great people in Ukraine, a lot of great people in Russia, and it's a shame that it's come to this. I think people need to not oversimplify this and really try to figure out, what's the best path forward. And independent Ukraine would have been the best path forward. Not part of NATO, not part of Russia, but let them be like Switzerland. And I don't think we'd be in this mess if we had taken that approach.
Yeah, that's the follow-up question I have for you. Do you think that the administration's push to, or and the other NATO members as well, not just the U.S., talking about adding Ukraine to NATO, do you think that forced Russians' hand here at all, or do you think Russia had already decided this is what they were going to do?
I wouldn't say forced. You can't really force their hand, but that is, I do believe that's the cause of timing. I mean, it's not just pushing to get in NATO, but also sending military weapons in. We've sent a lot of military equipment in, and so that kind of stance certainly appears to be a threat to Russia. And there's also the issue, like I said, this was a country that's Ukrainian and Russians in it, and after there's allegations of mistreatment of the Russians after the new president came to power. I think they canceled. Russian was an accepted second language, and they canceled that. It was you must speak Ukrainian, things like that.
Ian, do you think Ukraine being part of the former, I guess we call it Soviet bloc, do you think there's an angle here that goes beyond the whole NATO situation where Russia is taking more of an imperialist approach to reuniting sort of the old USSR or is it more defensive in your thought?
It's a mix, and I think there's many more layers. Definitely the agricultural resources Ukraine has, Russia needs. The industrial base, the high-tech industrial base is in the Ukraine. There was extensive nuclear bases in the Ukraine. I don't know if that infrastructure still exists. Ukraine did give up the nuclear weapons they inherited on the promise that they would be protected and wouldn't be attacked. So much for that promise. Would it be better if they had nuclear weapons now? I don't know. There could be some debate, is Putin mentally stable? Or is he just living in an alternative world, which can be very real? I've worked with people who have been under schizophrenic illusions, and they are 100% real. They live in an alternative world, which is just as real as our world is. So, but yeah, I think their intentions are more than just saber-rattling and political and face-saving, and Putin reinforcing his image, and Putin trying to stay popular, because there is dissent in Russia. Even, it seems to be as fast as he kills off people who dissent, more pop up. They're not. So I think it could be at 70 years old, I don't think he sees a future doing anything else apart from being the dictator of Russia. He stated he wants to stay in power for another 14 years till he's 84. Heck, I don't know. Do you want to get inside the head of somebody like that? Maybe we should leave that to the US Special Services who are trained in that, and it could drive you crazy. But definitely he wants the resources of the Ukraine.
And the resources we were talking about before the recording include a lot of agriculture, so a lot of food, a lot of wheat, that could help support Russia through, some tough winters. I know Russia has some agricultural land, but a lot of it's frozen.
Yeah.
And so they may need additional food stores for, and it's kind of going off script a bit, but I think we're in a global cooling phase, and I think it's going to be harder and harder to grow crops. I think cold winter is coming farther south. I mean, I live in Texas right now. We're in our second ice storm, and I've been in Texas in years in which we didn't get below freezing more than a day or two or a few hours in a day, and yet we're dealing with 9-degree, 10-degree Fahrenheit temperatures, which is several times per winter now, and getting more precipitation during the winter months than we ever have. We're breaking, 50 and 100-year marks there. And I know that NASA has shown through its satellite imaging that we're getting generally a little bit cooler. It's a general, minor cooling period in the Earth's history. And that's going to put pressure on agriculture. So perhaps, China has studied this and knows, and has been cornering like the wheat market, the futures market, for example. Russia may be saying, okay, well, we're just going to, since we're going into Ukraine anyway, maybe we benefit from that agriculture that we need. Perhaps that's one of the reasons why.
Just kind of counterpointing comments that, I don't agree with Ian on Putin, but I don't know the guy, right? But if he is intent on rebuilding the Soviet empire, right? You look at what happened to both the Soviet Union, the U.S., and Afghanistan. You look at the cost of occupying countries. If he wants their resources, having trade agreements in a neutral Ukraine would be far less expensive and more beneficial to Russia. This talk I listened to, the guy actually said, look, if you want to weaken Russia, you want to encourage them to invade all these countries, because then, they're going to go bankrupt. Their debt to GDP is like 22%. They've got a lot of gold. They're in a very strong financial position. And
one of the strongest financial positions, Jim, of any country in the world, including China.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if they choose to go down that path, it's going to weaken them. So I hope that they don't. I guess we'll find out. It would be one thing to reintegrate the two eastern provinces, primarily Russian, but if they take Ukraine and then look at the Baltics, again, wonderful people in the Baltics. I went to Estonia. And those guys have really embraced free markets. So, So we shall see. I don't agree with Ian, but again, I don't know the guy's mind. You know, I can only look at what has happened so far.
The problem is, I mean, yeah, I agree. If he does invade, it will probably end up as disaster, but not after 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 people are slaughtered. I mean, the Ukraine has 900,000 people on the reserve list from 16 years old to 60 years old.
Yeah.
Do we want 900,000 Ukrainians slaughtered by the Russian army?
No.
You know, so there is no easy answers. I mean, I think we were talking earlier, it may be much wiser for NATO to say Ukraine is never joining, but if you invade Ukraine, we're inviting them to join. We could have played that card, but that's gone. That's hindsight now. Sanctions, if we took the literally not the nuclear option, but the nuclear option in sanctions, if we just cut off all trade, so all Russian assets are permanently seized, and given to the Ukraine, what's left of the Ukraine, I don't know, but that's not going to happen because the interconnection of the dynastic families. You look at all of our presidents. I mean, okay, I'm going to offend every American now. You look at the Bush, Clintons, Obamas, Trump, Biden. They've all got their fingers in pies around the world that benefit from war and death and destruction. And if they disagree, let them come and talk to us and prove that they haven't got their fingers in the pie of benefiting. And was it Kissinger who warned us in '69 to beware of the military-industrial complex? That they will steal.
Eisenhower first did it.
Was it Eisenhower?
In his farewell address to the nation.
Yeah, so, yeah, beware. They will steal, they will basically steal the lives of your young men, and they will steal the effort, the production of your industry. Mm-hmm. And it's well.
I think, the military-industrial complex is certainly a big factor. But the other one is the petrodollar, right? Mm-hmm. So when we went off the gold standard, Nixon made an arrangement where the Middle Eastern countries would only sell oil for dollars, and that gave us indirect backing. Well, now Russia's putting the Nord Stream pipeline into Europe, and that's one of the things Biden's put on a sanction list is to shut that down. It's like, okay, so you're going to provide inexpensive gas to Europe, and we need to shut that down. And then we need to send our natural gas from the U.S. over to Europe, to just run our prices up. I mean, that makes absolutely no sense unless you look at it as trying to protect the petrodollar.
Yeah, I mean, less than 2 weeks ago, Biden was shaking hands with the leader of Qatar, doing a deal for Qatar to divert gas from Asia, from Japan and South Korea, to divert it and bring it to Europe. That deal was made, I think, it was in the Wall Street Journal. And then you look at the state in Qatar. I mean, you've got nearly 3 million guest workers living in abject poverty, a lot of them. It is a complete mess. And to circle back around, it seems to always come back to gaining more money, more wealth, and more power seems to be the motivation for decisions that are made. That often we don't, even in looking back in history, we don't really see the full picture of the machinations and the strings that were pulled.
But I mean, the good question is okay. So if defending the petrodollar is part of the motivation here, as far as the U.S. is concerned, does that benefit our citizens? And the answer is it doesn't. Right, the strong dollar world reserve currency policy has led to the erosion of the middle class and the erosion of our industrial capabilities, because you can just buy stuff from China for cheap, and it's led to the strengthening of China. So protecting this world reserve currency status is not benefiting Americans; it's benefiting the big banks, not us.
Yep. And eventually it collapses because our currency will not buy goods to be imported, and hence why we've all got into precious metals for different reasons and different times, because the dollar at best is a gold substitute.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's explore that topic a little bit for people that are viewing. The breaking I did right before we started recording this, I was talking to people very, let's just say very emphatically about don't wait on preparing. And it's not just gold, silver. Russia has about a third of the natural gas production in the world. They have the second most platinum palladium production behind South Africa, and South Africa is a mess right now. Politically, a lot of instability in their minds. They have a lot of other things. I think 17% of technology companies in the U.S. depend upon Russia to do work in terms of labor or resources. Russia has big stores of copper, tin, aluminum. Aluminum and tin and copper futures prices were spiking a few days ago on threat of war. I can't imagine what they're doing right now as we speak. So if Russia is now cut off in trade from the West, how does that affect our industry, our prices, our economy? How does that affect natural gas flows to Europe? I mean, there's a lot to talk about here and how it could affect people just on an everyday basis. Yeah. Thankfully, we're not in Ukraine having to deal with the physical issues. But what are the long-term ramifications if Russia gets isolated and their economy gets isolated from the rest of the world? Doesn't that affect all of us?
It could be really good, Rob. It could be incredibly good if we stopped using resources for stupid reasons. Mm-hmm. And if we stop, you think of all the frivolous uses we use of valuable metals, gas. What is it with gas fire pits? People want to sit out in their yard and heat their whole yard to 90 Fahrenheit, burning millions of cubic meters of gas.
Mm-hmm. Gas is to use melt silver down. That's what you use gas for.
Yeah. And it comes back round to an illusion of wealth. Mm-hmm. That you think you can do this, but there's a price to pay at the end of the day. The dollar as a world reserve currency has given America and me, since I've become American, privileges to consume beyond your actual real wealth. And so you get a complete misallocation of primary resources, you get a misallocation of labour and a misallocation of capital, which is destructive. But the good news is if we wake up and stop wasting stuff, we could probably cut our consumption by 30% in pretty well everything.
Mm-hmm. But Rob, you were saying if their trade is cut off with the rest of the world, it's not
because
going
right now the U.S. is doing sanctions. Russia can retaliate. I mean, what's going to happen is what's similar to happen in previous world conflicts is that trade routes and trade agreements are going to get rerouted between sub geopolitical agreements. The problem I see with that is it gets more difficult to do that, or perhaps more costly to do it because the world trades with each other now. We're much more of a worldwide trading relationship than we were 100 years ago. So all these sanctions and all these things that are traditional measures are going to have even deeper effects than they would have had 100 years ago. Well, and what's the effect on people of that?
Well, I mean, Russia's been preparing for this. They've been establishing trade without using dollars, right? So they can get cut off from dollars. They can't get cut off from trading with China.
Right.
And maybe we cut off the trade of the Nord Stream pipeline to Europe, but that's because make Europeans suffer.
Yeah.
Right.
In terms of, is that going to prevent Russia from doing anything? No. I mean, I'm
talking about the effects on the West.
Oh, yeah.
If Russia goes over here and says, we're no longer participating in your Western system, how does that affects us in a way? That's why we don't want to cheer it on and we don't want it to happen, is my point.
Yeah, it's going to hurt us more than it's going to hurt them. When I say hurt us, hurt the average American. Right. It can help keep the dollar strong, which helps the banking system, but it doesn't help the average American. It just drives our prices up. And, if you think inflation's bad now, then toss on sanctions. Now toss in an act of war where we start getting involved. I mean, I can't imagine. Like we have to get out of there.
Yeah, you wait till oil is $300 a barrel.
Yeah, and think about this for a minute. China's got the Belt and Road Initiative. They now have 73% of the world's GDP participating at different levels. Not like it's one giant, cemented trading block that doesn't trade with the U.S., but China's got their fingers in it. You talk about fingers in the pie, talk about China having fingers in the pie. They're doing what the IMF did. There's a lot of news coming out recently about the IMF bailing out all these nations, Argentina, Sri Lanka, and that's how the IMF gains control, because they know these countries eventually can't pay back. So they take their natural resources as collateral. And so the IMF gets its hands into all these resources around the world, and people don't know it. They don't understand. They think it's purely a financial organization, but it's a resource grab. Well, China has actually done this with the Belt and Road Initiative on an even grander scale. And so essentially what you've got is China having their fingers in all these different pies, and Russia being their ally will benefit from that. So I do think China and Russia aren't as vulnerable to disruptions in trade and sanctions. They are vulnerable, but not as much. But I see China being the main instigator in that end. I don't see Russia being, the BRI instigator or propagator. I think they're a part of it. And I wonder if China has a longer term plan in which Russia is sort of, in a way, its proxy for fighting some of these wars with the West, while China just sits back and says, Russia, you go do your thing. And China's sort of a little brother here. I'm sorry, Russia's a little brother, and China's kind of orchestrating some of this behind the scenes.
It would seem to me that Russia is Putin. Now, no offence to Russians, but the man at the top who's got the control is telling everybody what to do. Mm-hmm. He's got a 14-year plan. He wants to stay in power to 2036. Mm-hmm. And I think he considers that's the end of his life. China tends to think in a 100-year plan. Mm-hmm. So it could end up very badly for Russia, that China would end up controlling a lot more than Russia would think. Do a deal with the devil.
Yeah, I mean, and they're both de-dollarizing. They've both been preparing for trade without the dollar, and they're increasingly using gold as a neutral reserve asset. And I think that is a good thing. It's a shame we're not doing the same thing. Yeah. But gold as the reserve asset provides a lot of stability in terms of trade balances, right? Because one country can't print it. Our ability to print has led to our jobs going overseas. Yeah. Instead, if it's gold, as you trade, if you have a surplus or trade deficit, gold piles up in one country, and then that changes the value of gold. It gets less valuable, and that performs a natural balancing system. Plus, it's a neutral reserve asset that is not political, right? The dollar is very political. We can tell people what to do, or we're going to shut them down.
And beautifully, its production is pretty well being equal to the increase in the human population over millennia. So the amount of physical gold increase year on year is pretty well identical if you track it over centuries. So it's naturally increases rather than being abnormally inflated.
I agree with that. There have been a couple of minute exceptions in history where you had big gold booms, but those tend to last a few years, and then it evened out again. It never was like this 50 or 100-year cycle like we have with the fiat currencies, where it just balloons up. Whenever you look naturally, it's basically self-regulating, because even if you have an excess of gold, the market will figure that out. And then when gold smooths back out, so gold has been if you chart it over time, it's been very stable when compared with the fiats. The fiats, when you get people involved, all of their hubris and their arrogance, they think that they can do it forever. They think they can engineer a natural system, and you can't engineer a natural system. You're part of that system. You can't engineer everything that's running around you. And getting back to the commodities, I think that we've tried to engineer commodities as well through these futures markets, and it's ended up causing what I describe as huge waste, like Ian has described. Do you think in some aspects this conflict, even going back to the World War I and II, and now the potential for another big geopolitical conflict, is a reflection of humans' inability to live by natural law? In other words, if we had lived by natural law and hadn't gotten so excessive, it wouldn't allow us to have expanded our influence as much. If we'd stayed within our means, maybe a lot of this wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we had stuck with sound money, I mean, imagine, World War II, we went out and pitched bonds, and we had to get people to buy bonds to support the war effort. We don't have to do that anymore. We can just print the money, Fed can monetize it, and we can go to war. Imagine trying to pitch bonds for, a war in Ukraine to the American people. It wouldn't happen. But not only do we not have to pay for it, we also don't even bother to vote for it in Congress. Like one guy at the top can just decide to take us to war. The Congress is supposed to officially declare war, yet for the past several months, you've had all sorts of bureaucrats saying we will go in and defend Ukraine. It's like, you can't say that. Congress is the only one that can get us over there. But
yeah, separation of powers where the president is the commander in chief, but has to, and that's mainly really for defense. And once you get into war, he's the guy at the top, the person responsible. But the Congress, like you said, is supposed to be able to vote us in. But you look at all the wars in the Middle East. Did we get voted in all of those? I don't think we did. I don't think they held separate votes every time they went in and to Yemen or Syria or all that stuff. I think Trump acted without a congressional mandate in Syria, and that was used against him because, they were shooting tomahawks and stuff. That's war to me. When you shoot a missile at somebody, that's defined as war.
Yeah.
He didn't have a congressional mandate to do that. So all presidents have kind of abused that power to different extents.
Yeah, I mean, and unfortunately, Congress has kind of abdicated that responsibility at times. Like they've said, well, we authorized you to use force if you think it's necessary. So it's like, we're not going to vote for it.
Right.
We'll just delegate it to you. It's like, no. Either declare war or don't declare war. Not, we'll let you make up your mind.
So gold is trending up. I mean, I don't want to celebrate this because it's not something to celebrate, but gold is at 1921. It's firmly in a breakout. Silver's 2464. 2450 is critical technical resistance there. That's a breakout in silver. The metals are doing well. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. I think that surprises a lot of people, especially people in alternative investments. The gold and silver come right back, but throughout history, gold and silver have always been that crisis hedge. Is it any surprise to you guys what gold and silver are doing right now? And do you think it's going to stop anytime soon?
I was surprised silver didn't break through 30 last night. The rate, let me pull up let's see if I can share the...
Well, in overnight trading last night, I see it got to about 25.50 and gold got to about 1973. And then they got slammed down about 8:30 a.m. this morning after the American markets opened, both of them.
Yeah, 25.64 we got on London.
Yeah.
Well, and there's been a lot of talk about, now there's an excuse to not raise rates. And I totally believe that. If they were going to raise rates, maybe it's once or twice, and then they'd be forced into reversal. But now maybe they won't even raise rates, and maybe gold's sniffing that out. Gold was showing a lot of strength before, this kind of kicked off. Despite interest rates having gone quite a bit up, gold was, hanging in there pretty well.
So let's talk about that for a minute. So Bullard came out as the uber aggressive guy, saying we should do a 0.5 point and then 2 more quarter points by, I think he said July, if I remember correctly, June or July, by about the middle of the year. Now, is there any chance that we even get up a 0.5 point at all this year? Because I don't, if the Fed does that amongst all the instability, what does that do to markets? What does that do to the stock market? Stock market right now is in a correction. I think one of the indices is down 10%. That's what I officially call a correction once you get to 10%. And they're both all opening wedges down. The Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ are all open wedges downward. It doesn't look pretty on the technical charts for the major American indices. If the Fed, in addition to all the geopolitical issues, the raging inflation that we have, the economic weaknesses with the labor force participation rate, if they really start to aggressively raise rates, what happens to the economy at that point?
It implodes.
And how far can they go? I said 1%. This is before the Ukraine situation. I said 1%. I said with high inflation, you could get 1% if you did it in incremental and let the market absorb it. It's still going to slow the market down, but you could probably get to 1%. After that, it was up in the air. I'm not sure you can get to a 0.5% at this particular point unless things settle down.
It does depend on what their game plan is. As most of us know, and most of our viewers, the Federal Reserve is not federal, it has no reserves, and it's not a bank. It's a private corporation for the benefit of its owners. It's never been about for the benefit of the American people. I would not put it past them to put interest rates up to 100%, destroy everything, and then mop up the pieces at the bottom. They are that callous. Every recession, depression in America since 1929, possibly even the 1920, has been caused by the Federal Reserve, and they have benefited tremendously from during. They game it on the way up, and they game it on the way down.
Yep.
So I would not. Basically, no, I'm not allowed to say the word. They are what the words that come out their mouth. Anybody watch Gregory Mannarino? He talks about cat poo wrapped in dog poo. That's what they speak. And for people to give them credence, and for the financial press to give them credence, you just could be some sort of fruitcake to believe that what comes out their mouth is rational or logical or of benefit to anybody apart from themselves. And it's time we woke up and called them out for what it is. And I agree with Ron Paul, not end the Fed, make the Fed irrelevant. We need to individually, in our own lives and in our regions, and the best we can, take actions that make the Federal Reserve irrelevant.
Yeah, 100% agree. That's the whole goal of Citizens for Sound Money is, we can't fix the federal government. We can't get them to back the dollar by gold. But you don't need to just start using sound money in your daily lives yourselves and protect yourselves. And develop this parallel system.
Thanks to Ian for sending me this 10-ounce bar. This is sound money.
Yeah.
So I get this 10-ounce bar from Ian at Ark Silver. I got a 𝙂𝙊𝙇𝙀𝙍, a nice 𝙂𝙊𝙇𝙀𝙍 Swiss. So you can go to Ark Silver, you can go to Silverback Precious Metals, you can get this stuff. Jim, what are you doing at Silverback?
Well, we've got these piling up because we've cut a lot of bars and we make these from the shavings. So I think we'd like to give you guys a special deal on that. I can get you some info on that.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, through Gold Silver Pros, you guys have been
10-ounce
super
rounds.
gracious to our viewers and offering some of the cheapest silver that you can find anywhere on the planet. I mean, I challenge people to find better deals. Now, it's not on every issue of silver. Sometimes it's a special issue like a 1,000-ounce bar, a 10 or 25-ounce cut bar, or 40% Kennedy's or something like that. But it's still silver at the end of the day. And you can contact these gentlemen directly on their websites, or you can go to goldsilverpros.com and click on precious metals deals, and you can email them that way. Jim, I think you're doing mostly a wholesale business, right? Are you also doing retail?
So we're trying to get into more stores in the meantime. We still do retail, but you just apply for a membership. If you're near a store, we'll send you to that store, but otherwise you can still buy. But yeah, definitely go through your website and do it that way. And then we'll add the membership and then tag it as being a Gold Silver Pros membership so we can offer some special deals to those people.
Okay. We'll do it. I thank you, gentlemen, for offering that. Any last closing thoughts before we wrap this one up today, guys?
Yeah, I've had a revelation, and I would say if you've got a reasonable amount of silver, start buying gold. So we're called Ark Silver, but we do sell gold. And again, we are better than all of the big four online guys. And on the kilos, while stocks last, I haven't got many left. It took 4 weeks to get them in. $2.22 premium.
Any last comments?
Just check out Citizens for Sound Money. That's with the number 4, and Silverback Precious Metals. Two totally different hats I wear, but obviously related. And
Talk
1
minute about Citizens for Sound Money, Jim. What is the goal of that organization?
So the goal is to encourage people to use sound money and to protect the right to do so. So that second part, that's why we're a 501c4, so we can engage in lobbying efforts. We have started to get active on state legislation by working with Sound Money Defense League. JP, he's been great. And but the first part is, encouraging people to use sound money, and that's both buying physical for savings or for barter, and then also asset-backed digital currencies for more modern digital means of using gold and silver as money.
Fantastic. Thank each of you gentlemen for joining. I appreciate the conversation and your background. Everybody stay tuned to Gold Silver Pros for more content. We're going to keep covering this and breaking new segments, roundtables, and general discussions on the channel. And as always, we'll bring you the best deals in precious metals we can. It helps out the channel when you guys support us. It helps out these guys, but I think it helps out your pocketbook a lot to get away from some of the higher price retail guys in the market. Thank you guys for joining.
Thank you, Rob.
Hey everybody, this is Robert. Thank you so much for watching that video content. I have a couple of quick announcements I'd like to share with you as we head out of this video. Also wanted to remind you, you can find us on goldsilverpros.com. We have a free newsletter. If you click here and enter your email address, we'll send that out every Monday to you, as well as we have special precious metals deals with leading bullion dealers here in the United States. If you click that button, you can go here and click on either Miles Franklin or Ark Silver and get the best deals in the business. Once again, thank you guys so much for joining us on the channel. Until next time, this has been Gold Silver Pros.